bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Rika, the friends also known as Ricky France, and I just had an amazing conversation with somebody you guys might know as Smelly, Mark Smelly Bell. He's a power lifter. He's the founder of Super Training Gym, Power Magazine, inventor of the Sling Shot, and he's a thinker, philosopher, business owner, and just a really interesting guy to chat with. We had a really fun discussion about everything from diet, nutrition, mental health, physical health, philosophy. I'll put links to his social media accounts and all that stuff in the show description. I also highly recommend you guys go check out the interview I did with Mark's brother, Chris Bell. Chris Bell's a documentary filmmaker who did Bigger, Stronger, Faster, Prescription Thugs, Leap of Faith, about Kratom, and that's one of the topics we discussed when he was on the show. We talked about Kratom, we talked about Big Pharma, we talked about nutrition, keto, a bunch of different things. So definitely go back in the archives and check it out. It was episode 139. Remember, if you want to support the show, I do have a Patreon page. And if you do support me on Patreon, once a month, I do a Patreon podcast with my Patreon supporters. And then I release it as an episode. I also let you know in advance who I'm booking and who's coming on the show and all that type of stuff. I also have a PayPal account if you want to tip the show. And I'm also on Rockfin. So I have a show called Ricky Rants on Rockfin, which is a exclusive show on Rockfin. I am eventually going to have my whole Ripple Effect podcast archives on there, so I can have some free content and premium content. So if you start a free account, you can go there, get all the free stuff. And then if you decide you like it, you can get the premium account. So it's a great way of supporting all the content creators that are on there. Abby Martin just joined Rockfin, Lee Camp, Last American Vagabond, Jason Burmis, Sam Tripoli. So many great content creators are on Rockfin. So it's an awesome platform. Just check it out. And then also my merch store, the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com is my merch store. If you want to get hoodies like the one I wear in this episode, or mugs or t-shirts or whatever it may be, check that out. Also, the Union of Unwanted, which is my other show that I co-host with Sam Tripoli from Tinfoil Hat Podcast, Midnight Mike from the OBDM show, and Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions. That has their own RSS feed, YouTube channel, all that stuff. It also has now its own merch store. If you go to theunionoftheunwanted.com, it brings you to our Linktree page where you can find links to all our accounts and also our merch store. So go there, check out the Union of the Unwanted merch, hoodies, t-shirts, all that type of stuff. If you can't support the show financially, of course, like I always tell you guys, don't worry. Rate the show, review the show, share the show. That goes a long way. And that's it, guys. Enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for being with me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Like the guitar in the background, ready to rock and roll, huh?
Yeah. We could talk metal. We can talk wrestling. We can talk lifting. There's a lot of different roads we could go down.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I had your brother on some years ago. It was during when he came out with Leap of Faith and that whole Kratom thing, and
Right.
which was awesome, obviously. And I feel like people like yourself, your brother, and people in the nutritional world and kind of been following a lot of the debating and the science with nutrition. When 2020 happened, we almost had a better understanding of how the science is never really settled, because people kept throwing those terms around and kept saying, well, this, doctor says this and that doctor is pseudoscience because he doesn't agree with this one. And even with injuries, and just to let you know, like I like to just jump right into it just to keep it casual and flowing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And even with like injuries, for example, if you get hurt lifting weights, it was typical that you could go to a second doctor, get another opinion, another doctor gives you a different opinion, and it was acceptable. And then all of a sudden it wasn't, it wasn't acceptable for doctors to disagree. What's your take on all that? I mean, from somebody who you very much are open-minded to looking into, I mean, you have, we've had a lot of actually some of the same guests, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, Dr. Sean Baker, so many people who might disagree on specifics and whatnot. So you see how science can be, sometimes you can even find the science to defend the opinion you already have. And I mean, what was your opinion while this was all going on in 2020? Was some of that background helping you kind of understand that, like, hey, none of this stuff is really settled, and it just makes common sense that there's going to be conflicting opinions?
After being on this earth for 44 years and being married and having, a business and achieving some accomplishments in powerlifting and things of that nature, I've come to the conclusion the most important thing you can ever learn is how to control your thoughts and how to control your mind. And when you're able to do that, it makes everything else kind of irrelevant. And I think that what we saw with COVID-19 and some of the things that happened in 2020 and now in 2021 is that if you can live in this space of equanimity of having an even mind, you don't have to be worried about moving moving too far off of that path. And when you have equanimity, you can use your skill sets and you can use your thoughts and you can use your previous things that you've thought of in your life or previous things you experienced in your life to your advantage. And when it came to COVID, what the realization that I came to very quickly was this comes down to personal responsibility. And I don't personally care a whole lot about what like Dr. Fauci has to say or anybody else for that matter, or what the news has to say. And the reason why I came to that conclusion, which was years ago, even before some of this stuff happened, is the news has a job to do, and they're trying to not necessarily promote what's in our best interest, but they're trying to dictate to us what they think is going to be the most entertaining for us to consume. And so because of that, they're not really necessarily giving us the best way to lose weight or the best way to gain muscle or the best way to the news is riddled with a lot of things that can easily be negatively interpreted because of the context and the way that they deliver the message and the different things that they share. And so it's very easy to kind of get beat up or overtaken by some of the information that's out there. The way I looked at some of the situations that were going on was, okay, there's a virus going around, and there's some things that are common amongst viruses. They're usually can be passed on within fairly close distance of each other, making contact with another human being. Breathing on another human being could be another way. So perhaps a mask could be of benefit. I kind of have my own opinions about masks, but they can be beneficial. So some social distancing, a mask, and washing your hands, those are all things that make some sense. And that's what that's the best. It's kind of pathetic to me to think that that's the best that we could come up with out of all the different smart brains that are in this universe. That is just not enough. That just does not make sense to me. I do think it was great that we, had a warp speed like process to get to the vaccine. So I think that that's great because that gives a lot of people peace of mind, and people get to that equanimity level. They get to have an even mind because now they can know that there's something that may potentially be helping a lot of people.
Yeah, but wasn't it telling that, and I'd like your opinion on this. Like, don't you think did you get the sense of, because I have my own opinions on the whole vaccine thing. I've had Del Bigtree on and plenty of, I dive deep into that whole debate, and a lot of the reason why I had your brother on before, Chris, and to talk about Leap of Faith and his great documentary Prescription Thugs. It's a topic that I hit on a lot, is how, and I love what your brother said, I think on a recent podcast with you, about how, you look at animals as your food and plants as your medicine. It was a great line. And, I kind of look at life like that too. Like, your best method to fight something is strengthening your own immune system. Your body is amazingly able to fight things off, and even in most cases, like, you're still kind of depending on your immune system to do the work anyways. I mean, we look at, like, vaccine. If you believe in vaccine science and you believe that it works, you're literally, all you're trying to do is trying to get your body to produce the cure, to produce the method to fight the virus. So do you think that it was, and this is, I don't want to get you too down to conspiratorial hole. I don't know how far you want to go down there, but obviously, when you talked about, and you run a business, all about how to run a business. When the news, who's supposed to be giving you information, when every other commercial is a pharmaceutical commercial, and then you go to the anchor, and his salary is paid by those commercials that are pharmaceutical. And like I said, if you guys haven't seen Prescription Thugs, great documentary. And when the pill epidemic was happening, no politician, no news station would talk about it. Why? Because I think of the same reasons. Do you think it was kind of weird that nobody was promoting health? Nobody was talking, and in some cases, and I remember hearing Rogan talk about this, about how people were getting in trouble on YouTube for talking about vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc. Almost like talking about any other possibility of fighting the virus was taboo. Stuff that we've known forever, it all of a sudden became taboo. And yet the only thing that would be promoted is this experimental vaccine, because it's not FDA approved. And they're kind of pushing that. Do you think, does that concern you at all, like the way that they're handling all this?
No, my training, that I work on often doesn't allow me to get like moved off the needle too much on any of this stuff, because I'm not worried about what anybody says. I hear that often. People say, nobody taught us about this, or nobody mentioned that. But there Joe Rogan is in mentioning it. So I don't really need to hear it dictated from anybody else. That's why I mentioned off the bat personal responsibility being a key component to the whole thing. And you do you, and you let me do me, and let your family do. Once we start dictating stuff, it gets to be, that's where things get to be a little bit weird. I do think some of the precautions that were taken are okay. I don't know how effective they are. I think you can argue one way or the other. But if I'm going to shout from one side of the fence or the other, it's just going to move me off that needle of kind of having an even mind, and of staying, more so at baseline. I like to be at baseline so I can make better judgment calls on what's to come, or what's going on. In terms of like shutting down schools, in terms of like shutting down our society, in my opinion, not necessary, not needed. Most likely should have never happened. I know that people are like, oh, well, maybe more people would have died. Maybe, maybe they would have, but maybe more people would also have their businesses. Maybe more people would have had better experiences. Maybe we're not going to lose as many people to suicide and just things like that. So we'll never really know. And where I kind of like to, kind of drop the microphone on subjects like this, is that it'll never be like admitted. It will never be known just how outrageously just got to find the right word, but I think the whole thing was massively overblown. We've had a lot of viruses in the past. You take viruses that we've had, previously, N1H1 and things like that. I know people are like, well, it's not as dangerous, or whatever. And then you also have things like the flu and things like that kill people of all ages. We've never responded the way that we did. I do think some of the practices that we underwent, I think some of them are good, because I don't really personally know anyone that's really been sick at all of any kind. And so maybe some of these practices are things that we should have been practicing for a while, in terms of social distancing and just communicating with people to wash their hands. I do think that in an 18-month time span, which is usually about how long it takes for a virus to pass naturally or with a vaccine for it, I do think that, yes, we could have, our government could have done a better job promoting health and fitness and things like that. But I think they just don't, because our society our society is so broken. Our society is so beat up. Our society is so unhealthy. And then what is our society unhealthy from? They're unhealthy from all those commercials that you just mentioned. And so there's a lot of money there's a lot of money being passed around, and like this message of like, don't go to McDonald's or something like that, or hey, start to cut out fast food or start to cut out soda. You're going to tell people to cut out soda, then that person that has that message might be missing some fingers the next day, like there's a lot of things. I'm not saying it's that bad, but there's some things to really consider in this whole chain of events that we have as a government and as a society that relies heavily on free enterprise and being able to, in a way, like bamboozle and fool people, trick people into buying shit that they don't really need necessarily, and making them feel left out when they don't purchase it. Like it's the American way, and I'm part of it. Like I have products to sell too, and I think that once we start to try to manipulate that in any way, then things tend to go south. And so I think the government, while there may have been some people in the beginning that really wanted to say, hey, you should go out for a run or whatever, I just think they're also thinking like, if I tell someone to go out for a run, there's people that are like 300 pounds, they're going to go and twist their ankle and so on. And so, but telling people to go out and get some sun, see the sunrise, see the sunset, like there are a bunch of things that could have been done, but now we know about them. And so let's just talk about them now, and let's just kind of promote that from here on out. But again, I go back to personal responsibility, like put the onus on yourself. Like the government doesn't have to help you out of these things. I don't need fucking anything from anybody. Like COVID-19 had zero impact on me. All it did was skyrocket what my company's capable of doing. Like we've just moved faster, we've moved stronger, we've been better than ever. So I like a good challenge. And when something seems to go awry in society, for me, that's time to put the pedal to the floor because everyone else is on pause.
Yeah, I think that's what makes good business owners is people who they're good at like problem solving, not skills that the school system's designed to get us to regurgitate information. And that's why usually people who are good business owners or just people who are really creative and have creative minds, they're not necessarily people who have PhDs. Or I know I've heard you say, you're like, I'm not an expert at anything. I'm not, but you're one of the most intelligent people I hear, on podcasts and just discussing things, mostly because of how open-minded you are, how willing you are to see both sides of the arguments. You're not, I can always tell with your brother and you that you guys try really hard not to be tribal in regards to, especially in the nutritional world, because it's really easy to kind of like join a tribe and then just defend that tribe and say everybody else is wrong. But nobody debunks science more than science itself. That's something people don't realize. When people say the science is settled, and I'm like, that's the most unscientific thing you could say. I'm like, science is constantly, debunking itself. With me, I'm very much like you. Like we should take personal responsibility. I think health shows and these type of shows are so important because regardless what you do for a hobby or for a passion or for pleasure, it's hard to enjoy it. It's hard to pursue it and do it if you don't have energy, if you don't have health. Like health to me is like the foundation to everything. Like I can do this podcast because I have the energy to come pursue interviews and guests and post it and do all that stuff. These type of shows I feel like can I could do shows on geopolitics and wars and big pharma, but when it's about like health and nutrition and stuff that can change your life right now, I think they're so crucial because somebody could take something away from it that can actually benefit their lives in regards to giving them more energy to enjoy their kids or their life or whatever it may be. During the whole, in 2020 and moving forward, I think we learned how important exercise was to us, not just for physical strength, but for mental strength. I mean, to me, it was I always tell my wife this. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, exercise and going to the gym is like a spiritual thing. Like, I need it. It's a part of my daily routine. I need it. Even if I get a light workout, I need it just to kind of start my day. get me going mentally. I feel better physically. I feel better. It makes me a better father. It makes me a better husband. Makes me a better everything, because it gives me this sense of therapy. And you saw during the lockdown that so many people, when their gyms were closed, they were finding. I mean, I saw people bringing dumbbells to the park and working out outside just because they needed to find some method, something, some way of getting that done. And I think as you get older, the mental benefits of it become surpass any, the physical benefits. You stop pursuing those things. Is that something you think that people have learned and then hopefully do learn from this whole experience?
Yeah, I love trying to lower that barrier of entry into fitness for people, and maybe stop looking at fitness as fitness, or stop looking at fitness as workouts, and really just attach your idea to, like, let's just talk about doing an exercise, not necessarily even exercise, but just one exercise. I know the local park has a chin up bar, and a spot where I'm going to do some push-ups, or mountain climbers or something. And so therefore you jump up and you mess around with the pull-ups, and you do it back and forth until you get a good, you get a couple exercises in. You don't want to go to the gym. You're talking yourself out of it. It's getting later in the day. You had a quote unquote long day. And you're interpreting that as you should go home and enjoy yourself and reward yourself. Maybe get some fast food on the way home or something like that. And really, it's really as simple as changing your mindset towards that and saying, you know what, like, go in the gym and just do one exercise. They say you can't eat just one chip, right? Like with a Lay's potato chip. But I would also say that you can't just go and do one exercise. Like, it works both ways. You can get the fuck it's in either direction. You can say, fuck it, I'm going all in, and I'm going to be a goddamn maniac, and no one's going to ever see anybody like me ever again. Or you can go all in the other direction and say, fuck it, I'm going to let my diet go. I'm going to let my fitness go. And I'm just going to, it's really easy to do either one. It's obviously easier to do the thing that requires you to not go through pain. But, they say mind over matter, but I would say mind over muscle in a way, because it's the training of the mind that you're really doing. And that's really what you're after. And so even taking things a step further, rather than thinking about even just one exercise, just think about, like, I'm going to train my mind, and I'm going to go do, um, I'm just going to go do something challenging and make it different, make it fun, treat it like a little kid, like you're a little kid and you're just like, I want to see if I can, like, pull on this weight 100 times. Like a little kid would make up something completely weird, or something that we would think would be irrational. I'm going to jump up on this box 20 times, and then I'm going to, run back and forth on the turf or whatever. Like, just, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be scientifically written out by anybody else. You can make it fairly simple, but understand that what you're trying to do is to expand your mind so that you can understand a way that you can handle more. One way to handle social media is to delete it, right? Another way to handle it is to reevaluate your interpretation of what's going on in social media. And I would say that the latter would be more effective, because it doesn't negatively impact you because you don't fucking care, because your new interpretation of it is different. The way that you, the input that we get doesn't necessarily have to match the outcome, the output. It doesn't, we don't have to, we don't have to see something violent, or see something racist, or see something we don't agree with. And we don't have to necessarily get mad about it. Could laugh about it, be like, that's a joke. Like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe, this is silly that this is happening again. You can have whatever interpretation that you want. You get to pick that. You get to choose that. There's a little bit of space between our thoughts, the things that just kind of pop into our head, and what we think of those thoughts. And there's even more space between that and how we respond to those things. And so I always try to look at exercise as an opportunity to thoroughly train your mind to go above and beyond what you thought was possible. And there's not really a lot of great other ways of doing that. you're not going to really, you can get it from like reading and writing and exploring some of that, maybe playing some music. Like there's some cool things that you can get out of even just like a long like run or something, but most of the time it's going to be some form of tough exercise like a long run, or like doing a heavy set of squats or leg presses. You really start to learn a lot about yourself, and you start to uh, just recognize how you're going to, in the future, you're going to be able to handle more and more and more, because you set out to do a certain amount of reps, set out to do 20 reps, and you did 21 reps. Well, you just proved yourself to yourself. And you, what you want to do is prove yourself to yourself over and over again. And you want to improve yourself for yourself. And when you kind of start to do some of those things, you recognize all the answers that you need are within you. They're inside you. You don't need to go to anybody else. I don't need to go to David Goggins. I don't need to talk to Joe Rogan. I don't need The Rock to be on my podcast. I don't need anything from anybody. I feel really comfortable with who I am, what I've been able to build. And I've felt this way since I was a kid. I felt this way for a really long time. And a lot of these things have come from just slow, steady progress in the gym. Remember, progress is success. And when you start to taste that in a bunch of different areas of your life, like how often do you get to taste success? Like you can taste success like all day long if you are telling yourself that you're going to do something, and then you actually do it, and then you actually make progress. Fuck, man, that's a lot of success. Like there's something I do in my workouts a lot where I go and touch this tree that's outside, or I touch the wall, and it's just another box to check. I'm going to walk over to that wall and I'm going to touch it. And it's like, I just said in my head that I'm going to walk 100 feet or 200 feet and go and touch the wall. I saw myself do it. I physically made contact with the wall. Now I'm going to walk outside, and because I walk on the turf in the gym, I'm going to walk outside the gym and go and touch the tree. And it's like, hey, motherfucker, you did it, and you get a pat on the back for it. So you want to try to do that as often as you can. And what if you were to view everything in your life that is maybe a little bit of a challenge, or something that's hard, or something that you view as work, as just an opportunity? So now this meal that I have in front of me, should I go home and just eat the leftovers from last night, the chicken and the broccoli, or should I, stop at In-N-Out Burger? That's an opportunity to get better right there. That's an opportunity for improvement. You know what? You know what, Mark? You've told yourself before you wanted to be in better shape. In-N-Out Burger isn't going to get you there, man. Like, just fucking go, like, drive home right now. Go prove yourself to yourself and improve yourself for yourself, and not for anybody else. And you'll continually get little tastes of success throughout the day, all day long. And that's how we put up points on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of that quote: if you change the way you look at things, what you look at changes. And it's so true. If I wake up in the morning and I can either procrastinate and say, hey, I'm sore from playing basketball or soccer yesterday, I'm not going to go to the gym, or I can be like, okay, let me see if I'm tough enough to get through my workout today, as sore as I am. Let me see if I can just get there. And usually just getting there, I tell people, is, as you know, like, it's, once you get there, you're going to get a decent workout in. The hardest part is getting there. Once you get there, you're going to work out. Like you said, you're going to work your ass off. But it's getting there is the challenge. And naturally, we're procrastinators. We all have these internal battles constantly. And like you said, everything that you tell yourself you're going to do, that you accomplish, that's a little bit of success, regardless how big or how small it is. And that's what I love about, I got in lifting weights when I was in my teens. And one thing I loved about it was like how it taught me discipline. It taught me like, hey, like my wife always says, like, stop feeling guilty about, eating bad, or stop feeling guilty about missing a day at the gym, like, enjoy life. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, the guilt is my tool. Like, feeling guilty is how I use it is the fuel that I use to motivate myself to do better the next day. If I maybe overreact to my kids because they're not listening to me, I feel guilty about it, and it forces me to really have to examine who I am and how I handled it and how I could have done better. And if I was justifying my reaction in my head, or was it justified? So it's all these internal dilemmas I think are really important. And you learn these things from exercise, because it is one of those things where it's really easy to just say, hey, I didn't get enough sleep, I'm not going to the gym. Oh, I have too hectic of a day, I'm not going to the gym. You can make a billion excuses, or you can look at it as a challenge. And then when you do challenge yourself and you succeed, then then maybe you get a reward day from time to time, or maybe that glass of wine at the end of the night feels much better because you earned it. Even when I go on vacation, we're in Florida. I live in Massachusetts, or also known as communist China, but but with dictator Baker. But we went down to Florida for a little bit. My wife has some family down there a couple weeks ago, and I still have to go to the gym while I'm there because I can't enjoy myself. Like, my wife's like, "Why are you going to the gym on vacation?" I'm like, "Because like I'm good for like a day or two, and then after that I get antsy, and I'm like, I can't enjoy eating like a slob and going out to dinner. I'm like, what did I do? I didn't earn it, So some people see these things as flaws, but a lot of these lessons that we've learned, you can use for many other aspects of life. So that's what I love about lifting weights, is that discipline, that learning how to appreciate things, because maybe you suppress something from your diet. If I'm eating a bowl of pasta every day, I'm not going to appreciate a bowl of pasta. But if I'm on the carnivore diet for a month, and then all of a sudden I have some carbs, I'm like, oh shit, like I actually enjoy this now. I savor I mean, I might feel like shit afterwards, but and regret doing it, but you kind of get my point.
When you pick up that guitar that's behind you, and you can mimic something that like Jimi Hendrix did, whether it's your own version of it, it's not even close to what he did. It doesn't really matter. The fact that someone can do that, it just makes you recognize that there was time that went into that. When someone says, you say, hey, what's your best deadlift? And someone says 315. You recognize that there was some time put into the 315 deadlift. There's some people that start out pretty strong, and so maybe there wasn't that much time put into a 315 deadlift. Could be a bigger person, and maybe they're just kind of naturally pretty strong. But when someone tells you that they deadlifted 900 pounds, you can't help but just be kind of in awe of it. It wouldn't be any different if you're at like a party, and you got talking to someone, and you said like that you like art, or you like the painting on the wall, and they say, oh, I actually I do that as well. I paint, and I'm way into it, and I love it. And you kind of ask them about it, and it turns out that they make a living off of it. Well, it'd be the same thing. You would now be astonished, at least I would be, because now you're like, okay, wow, this is a discipline that someone gets involved in all the time, and this is how they were able to make this happen. And to your point, when you work towards your discipline, and when you earn your discipline, you also kind of earn your freedom. I believe Jocko Willink has, I think he's written a book on it even. But what can happen sometimes there is that you can be masochistic towards yourself, which kind of puts you in your own little version of hell, your own little version of prison in a way. And so you have to kind of be careful, because your wife's saying, hey, don't worry about the cheat meal. She's pretty dead on with that in a way. But to your defense, on your side of things, it's like, well, if I let this slide, like what's next? And you really well. So you're like, if I say fuck it this way, I'm going to say fuck it that way. And next thing you know, I'm going to, be a drunken mess at the end of the night. I'm going to miss my workout tomorrow. And so you have some concern over some of that. What I would say for people to understand, anytime that you like fuck up, or anytime you cheat on your diet, or anytime you mess up, there's a lot of different ways you can reinterpret some of that. But something that's been really helpful to me is just for me to say, you know what, I got to be honest. I would love it if I was more interested in this, but I'm not as interested as I thought. And that is like, that kind of gives you some relief, because you're not like, oh man, like I'm so attached to this. If I wake up in the middle of the night and go and raid my pantry and have like a couple bowls of cereal, that doesn't mean I'm a fuck up. That doesn't mean that I'm a loser. It doesn't mean that I have no discipline. It doesn't mean I need to beat myself up at all. What it means is, at the current moment, I'm not as interested as I once thought I was in ending up with a goal that I'm thinking about. So you have to kind of make sure, like, if this happens over and over and over and over again, you might want to reconsider what that goal is. Maybe recalibrate a bit and say, you know what? I said I wanted to be 8% body fat, but maybe let me go towards 12 because I'm at 14 or 15 now. Let me go towards 12 and kind of see what that feels like. As I get there, then I can recalibrate and I can set a new goal. So anyone that's kind of going through this, I know it's really stressful to try to, I know it can be really stressful to lose weight. And I think that this is the battle. A lot of times at night, anything past around 6 o'clock, you had dinner already, your body and your mind and your mouth and everything's kind of looking for something quite different than what you ate for dinner. And, there you are with that sweet tooth again. And so you have to ask yourself in that moment, first thing I like to ask myself is, how does this help? How does this hurt? Is this helpful towards my goal, or is this going to hurt my goal? Another thing that you can ask yourself too is, does this enhance the moment? Like, am I enjoying some pizza with my kids? Am I just chilling? Am I just kicking it? Because if we talked about your discipline helping you to earn your freedom, and you can't enjoy a slice of pizza with your children, maybe you might want to reevaluate what you're doing, not because not having pizza with your kids is wrong, but because not having pizza with your kids may prevent you from enjoying yourself as much as you maybe can. Having a glass of wine with the wife, having a couple drinks, just chilling, and just every once in a while, just not being your normal asshole self that's so connected to everything all the time. It's a really beautiful thing to be able to disconnect. I mean, it's actually a really interesting thing in our society. We really, really love the people that are highly disciplined, and we admire the fuck out of that. But how much do we admire the person that doesn't fucking care about shit? We're like, what's that guy's deal? That guy always gets the chicks. That guy's always the life of the party. That guy always has some underlying things about him where you're like, I would rather be more like him than I would be like Jeff Bezos. You're like, I'd rather be that motherfucker that just doesn't care. How does that guy, you ever sit there and kind of think about it? Like, how does that guy not care? He doesn't give a shit. And so it kind of leaves you sometimes, when we're thinking about like striving to be better and being the best and all these things, it sometimes leaves you in a weird frame of mind. But my idea of a good time, and my idea of what I am very interested in, is how to kind of ride that line, how to toe that line, be that person that people are like, man, he doesn't really seem to ever get stressed out about fucking anything. And yeah, he doesn't seem to really give two shits about this or that. He somehow is able to still plug away and still do the things that he loves, but then still be in good shape, and then still be strong, and still be accountable when you need to be. That, I think, to me, that's kind of my ultimate goal, is to try to find a way to ride down that freeway all the time, or as
Yeah.
much as I can.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was your brother that I think I heard say some years ago, called like a reward day instead of a cheat day.
Right.
And that's kind of that's kind of how I look at it, is that, and that's where like the guilt comes in when I give myself more than a reward day. It's like, okay, I was rewarded, now don't get out of hand. So you're right, like and the pizza thing's a perfect kind of example, at least for me, because Sunday nights the kids want to watch some WWE pay-per-view, and they're like, Dad, we're ordering pizza, we're just going to be slobs and enjoy it. And yeah, I could eat something else, and then I feel like I'm not participating in the whole ceremony and the whole thing. And so yeah, sometimes it is this balancing act where it's like, you want to enjoy life, and sometimes a diet or something could get in the way of really being involved and being in the moment. You know what? Make up for it tomorrow, as long as you know where that line is, where you don't go down that slippery slope. Because we all know that there's some people who, they're like food addicts. It's
Yeah.
they cheat today, and then they cheat tomorrow, and next thing you know, they're completely off their diet, and that can be an issue too. So, like you said, that balance is so important.
Yeah, real quickly, my friend Joel Green uses the word offset. Find a way to offset that meal. He does so with like specific foods and stuff, and he has like kind of a whole system. He's a crazy son of a bitch who's super smart, but offset it. Figure out a way to offset it. Don't you don't need to be, you don't need to have an eating disorder surrounding it. That's not what I'm referring to, but offset it. Maybe for that day, maybe you participate in a decent fast. You know, maybe you fast for 14 hours. Your first meal out of the fast is something that is minimal amount of fat, low in carbohydrate, low in overall calories, but high in protein. And that's kind of all you ate for the day. And then you're enjoying as much pizza as you want to eat until your heart's content. Another strategy that I use is I sometimes will eat something with a meal like that. You know, if I know that my daughter's going to like bake cookies or something and she's talking about it at dinner time, well, I'm actually going to intentionally eat some extra steak so that I eat less cookies, you know, just little things like that, that over time, or I might have a protein shake with the cookies again, just to say, all right, well, let's just eat like 2 cookies and not have it be this disastrous day. Because if you're exercising correctly and you have decent amount of muscle mass, 2 cookies, they're just going to taste good and they're not going to have really any negative side effects on you at all. So think of ways that you can offset it. Maybe that you're like, okay, well, next day I'm running anyway in the morning, should be good to go. And actually, powerlifting was fantastic with that, because you could eat like a pig and you can, you know, you don't want to get into a thing where you justify it too much, but I could have like ice cream and pizza or something the night before and just be like, this is just extra energy for me to bench more weight tomorrow, or for me to be a little heavier for tomorrow's lifting, because I better have some weight on me because I know that tomorrow's, you know, lifting is going to be real demanding.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you brought up fasting. I know you just did a 5-day fast not too long ago, right? How did that go? How'd you feel, and what were the benefits?
I really liked it a lot. You know, there's been very few things that I've done that have been things that were uh, that have kind of altered me a little bit. Like, and I think that that was one of them. I noticed since that time period that I've just stayed a little bit leaner. I didn't really do the 5-day fast with the intention of just getting leaner. I really did it as a reset for my whole body. And I think I'll probably do it like once or twice a year or some version of it. But the research is from a guy named Walter Longo. Some people are way into his research. Other people are like, he's got shit research. But what fascinated me is that he studied mice, but then he also studied this on humans as well. And there's just not that many good studies done on humans when it comes to really any sort of nutritional intervention, because it's just very difficult to account for. But at least as far as what he's promoting and what he's saying is that he noticed there was a lot of regression in disease for people that were doing what he calls 5-2, which is a 7-day fasting protocol where 5 days are fasting with really low calories. It's basically around 1,100 calories on day 1, and then from there it's like 800 calories every day. So it's a version of fasting where you actually are able to eat, which doesn't seem to make any sense. But at least, again, from the literature that he has, and there does seem to be some truth to this, that his style of fasting may be a little bit more superior to just a regular flat out just only drinking water type of fast, because of the duration that you're able to do it for. So I did do it for 5 days. As you can imagine, there's like some weird gut issues when you start to eat again. And like, I was like on the toilet quite a bit the next like 2 days. And part of the goal for me was to like try to make sure that I didn't like recalibrate and like just really overeat for the next week, because then that would nullify everything that I did. So even though I was trying to be aware of that, I still think my food still kind of caught up to me to a certain extent. So let's just, for argument's sake, say that I cut out let's just say 15,000 calories out of my diet, or we'll say 20,000 calories out of my diet. I think those calories have since probably been accounted for, because I think the human body always wants to kind of shift towards that. But at any rate, I have stayed a little bit leaner. I have stayed a little bit lighter, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. And this was recommended to me by a dentist named Dr. Joel Gold. And he wanted me to do this 5-day fast to help reset my body so I can sleep better. And I have been sleeping better, but I've also implemented some other things to assist with the sleep. So it's kind of hard just to say, hey, it's only because of the fasting. But what I will say is this, anybody listening to this right now that has trouble with sleeping, try to have your last set of calories be about 3 or 4 hours before you go to bed. I know that this would be really challenging for a lot of people, but just give it a shot. And I think you'll be surprised at what it can do. Because during the fast, every night of sleep was pretty good, except for I think day 3 or 4, I was just pretty fucking hungry. And so as I was going to bed, I'm like just thinking about what I'm going to eat when this damn thing is over. So it was really effective for me in that way. Um, I really enjoy fasting a lot. If you never have done a fast before, I just recommend, um, trying to, get your last meal in 2 or 3 hours before bed, and then, skip breakfast the next day. That's a good enough fast for most people to mess around with. And then you might want to start to play around with having a tighter and more condensed feeding/eating window. And if you were to do two things in your diet, you would be able to be very, very lean. And one of them is to utilize intermittent fasting and or have a very short eating window, which is kind of saying the same thing, just in different ways. Short eating window of 5 to 6 hours. It's not an onslaught of you eating for 5 to 6 hours straight. Eat 2 meals within those 5 to 6 hour time frames, and eat a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Maybe in addition to that, have 2 servings of vegetables with each one of those meals. Maybe finish off your night with a protein shake right when you're done with your last meal. But if you follow that protocol, it's going to be really hard for you to screw up. Obviously, you could, dump a bunch of butter and oil all over everything. But if you're just being reasonable and honest with yourself, like that protocol right there will knock off a lot of weight for a lot of people.
Yeah, fasting. I had Dr. Seafried. It was Dr. Dominic D'Agostino who recommended him to me, and who's done some research on cancer and the ketogenic diet, and fasting has also helped with people recovering from all types of things. It's amazing how dietary things like that, how helpful it can be. You look at, I've had Jim Abrams on, from the Charlie Foundation, and he had a son who was having violent seizures and wasn't aware because and he had access to all the best doctors, and nobody suggested that maybe the ketogenic diet could help, and there's some success with that. And look what ended up happening. Ended up curing his son of these violent seizures, and his son was on all types of meds for years from a dietary therapy of the ketogenic diet. So without a doubt, I mean, what you eat is either hurting or helping you. Like I use this metaphor a lot on the show where I say, like, you look at like your body, you have to look at it as like when you're old enough to drive, your parents are like, you have one car and that's the only car you're ever going to have. And if that shit starts falling apart, you're stuck with it. You're going to have to be, you're just going to have to deal with all the issues and the windows not rolling up and down and all the mechanical issues. So what would you do? You would be like, okay, I'm going to change the oil. I'm going to make sure I, put all the best fluids in it. I'm going to put the best gas in it or whatever. Well, your body is that car. I tell people all the time, like, your body's that car. You don't get to trade it in. You don't get to say like, hey, let me just not take care of it. And then once it starts falling apart, I'll just, trade it. Well, I mean, I know there's some futurists that would disagree with me and like, hey, we'll just download your consciousness into a robot. No problem. But if you looked at it like that, then every single life decision would be slightly different because I think it was Dr. Chris Kresher who said this, and it's so true. Like, people don't go from like healthy to sick overnight. Usually, it's a bunch of really bad, or bad life decisions that led to that. And sometimes it's just bad luck. Of course, people can get some weird, unusual disease or whatever. But in many cases, if you could go back and look at their whole life history, like what's the quality of food they're eating, how much exercise were they doing, were they going outside and getting enough fresh air and vitamin D, you can find that people, it was a lot of poor life decisions that led them there. So it's a lot of people when they're young, and I'm sure we're all guilty of it. When we're young, you eat like shit. You don't worry about it. You think you're gonna live forever. But once you start getting older, and your joints start hurting and all these other things, then you start realizing that maybe some of those life decisions you made could have been a little better, and a little bit. And you talked about personal responsibility. This is where I agree with you, and in a way I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think it's hard for people to have personal responsibility because look at when we were growing up. You're a little older than I am, but I think we were kind of sold the same propaganda in regards to wheats and carbs. Like you look at the food pyramid, like the way you were telling people to eat. So it's like even if you wanted to take personal responsibility and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do what's right. Let me see what the food pyramid says I should be eating, and then you eat the way they tell you and the way your school's telling you, and the way they're telling you to eat on TV. And next thing you know, you have arthritis, you have all these health issues, and you wanted to do the right thing. So I think that's a little bit of an issue too, is that sometimes your heart can be in the right place, but there's so much conflicting, information and opinions. It's like you don't even know where to start.
Yeah, and I think being a critical thinker, is really massive, and it's one of the reasons why I mentioned one of the most important things you'll ever learn is, uh, how to balance out your mind, and because if you don't do that, if you don't balance out your mind, and you don't have, um, you're not pulled around or towed around by your emotions. If you are pulled around by your emotions, it's very hard to make logical or rational decisions. If you're if you're crying, or even have a health issue. We had someone come on my podcast yesterday, and they said unhealthy people can't make healthy choices, because I asked them about Bill Gates, and he was kind of like, well, look at Bill Gates. He doesn't look great. And I know he's an older guy, and so you got to, give people a little bit of slack, but whatever nutritional intervention or protocol he's following, like, I don't think I want to be any part of that. Like, he doesn't look good. He looks like he's actually gained a lot of weight, which is interesting, because he's sharing this idea of like eating plants and not eating meat. And I think that people think that that's a really healthy route to go.
Bill Gates
And
is
I would, what's that?
Bill Gates is Satan. He is this dude has bought so much farmland. He his
Right.
his oral polio vaccine caused a polio outbreak. In one interview, you will hear him talk about how there's like the population issue, and then the next interview you'll hear him talk about vaccinating the world. And I'm like, is anybody connecting the dots here? Like, is he?
Right.
It's like there's something really this guy James Corbett, I highly recommend everybody checking out. He did a great documentary on Bill Gates, all the way back to his history and his links to eugenics, his family's history to eugenics, and all the weird things that he's involved in. He has so much influence all over the world. It's
The
crazy.
more, yeah, and the more he talks, it seems like the more damaging it is. And maybe he like, I mean, it seems like he's involved in a lot of practices that seem like they're actually very good as well, but it's just so hard to tell, like, what the hell's going on. But anyway, kind of back to originally what you were saying about taking personal responsibility. I think a great place to start with personal responsibility is if you have children, or you have children in your life in some way. I think it's great to teach them about critical thinking, and to ask them questions about, like, let's just say they hear stuff about the George Floyd hearing, and they start asking questions. I think it's great to not necessarily interject just your opinion, and flat out say what you feel is right or wrong. Say, hey, what do you think should happen with that situation? And who knows what they come up with or what they say. But I think it's great to ask them, because it's great to ask them a question like that, because then you can follow up with other questions that allow them to think critically. Like, do you feel like the police officers are going to get a fair trial? And then maybe your kid is like, I don't think they deserve one. And then you could ask another question. Well, why do you think that? And you can get into it a lot, and you can say, okay, well, that's, in America, you're supposed to be able to get a, even the same thing with the Boston bomber, right? The Boston bombing. They threw out his death penalty case, I think, a while back, because they felt like he didn't have a fair trial. There's some people that'd be like, well, F that. Like, why does the guy deserve a fair trial? He injured 270 people, and 15 people were altered forever because of they got lost limbs and so forth, right? But being a critical thinker, I'm not even talking about anyone's specific opinion about any of those things. I'm just saying, be a critical thinker, be somebody that kind of picks things apart a little bit, and start to examine, where's this information coming from, and why is it coming to me? Why am I being fed this? Why in the United States is there, or just why in general, is there a recommended daily allowance of carbohydrates when the human body does not appear to have a need for dietary carbohydrates, since the body can make glucose on its own? It doesn't appear that there could be advantages to that. I'm not saying that there's no advantage to it. I'm not even saying it's healthy or unhealthy, but maybe they are recommending grains and things that human beings are not necessarily genetically specifically designed to eat, or we have not, I don't believe that there's any point in our future where we're going to all of a sudden be able to digest Twinkies and ding dongs and donuts and things like that. These are all things that are man-made, and maybe you can even make an argument for, well, they're man-made, our maker or wherever we came from probably designed us to be able to handle anything that we can actually make, and maybe there's some truth to that. I don't know. But looking at this stuff under a critical lens of where is this information coming from? Why is there such a huge recommended daily allowance of something that my body doesn't actually need to survive or to even thrive? I would say people can get away with eating like 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrates and thrive just fine, which sounds like an extremely low amount. You might get that even just in your attempt to completely avoid carbohydrates. That's how low of an amount that is. And then on the flip side, there's not a recommended daily allowance for protein, which doesn't make any sense because you need protein to live. We need protein and fat to live. Carbohydrates are kind of a little bit more of an afterthought. And it's just interesting to try to have a critical eye, examine these things critically, and just say, well, maybe the government passes that down because maybe they have a certain amount of grains to sell. And maybe that's why the Quaker Oats box at the store has a little heart on it. Maybe that's why the Cheerios have a little heart on it. Maybe that's why all the General Mills products, say no added sugar, but then you look at the back and there's tons of sugar in the product. Just things like that. You just kind of, doesn't mean that anything's right or wrong necessarily. It's just things to throw a question mark at and say, I wonder if is that really in my best interest? Because it appears that America is very unhealthy. And, America is not unhealthy because of the food pyramid. America is unhealthy because we can't stop eating because of the hyper palatable foods that are out there. It's very difficult for you to all of a sudden stop eating any processed foods. It overrides our brain, and it overrides our ability to be like, hey, I'm full. But when you eat protein and fat, the body doesn't really work that way anymore. And when you eat straight protein, your body you're overriding your system in the other direction, where your body's like, I can't possibly eat one more bite of this chicken breast. I'm going to die. And so I think, being someone that has some critical thought, I'm very proud of both of my children. My son is 17 and my daughter is 13. When I ask them questions and they start throwing answers back and forth, it's just a really, really fun and really cool conversation. And I've been doing this since they were really little. I think they get annoyed with me at times, but it's a lot of fun to kind of see the answers and the things that they come up with.
Well, it's something you say a lot. It's perspective, right? And it's always, to me, like, so my son just turned 6, my daughter's 4. I'm the same way. I mean, I think most of us who do podcasts, we like conversation. That's why we have podcasts, and it's a great aspect of a personality to have when you have children, because I think a lot of times parents will just give the kids the quick answer. They'll mommy, what's that? Daddy, what's that? Oh, it's a whatever, it's this, whatever, and you just want them to accept whatever answer you throw out so you can end the conversation as quickly as possible. I've always been known for like over explaining things, which is beneficial to my kids, because I will take the time to like really go into detail and explain things, and then also try to see things from their perspective, try to understand their perspective. Because sometimes, like, even with my wife, she'll say like, oh, we've told the kids this, or I'm like, yeah, but you got to see from their perspective. I'm like, how are they registering the situation? It's like, it'll be time to come in for dinner, and some kid who lives up the street comes knocking on a door, and they haven't seen him in a week, and he wants to go out and play with them. Yeah, it's going to delay dinner a little bit. To you, as a parent, it's like, just get the fuck in the house so we can have dinner. Like, it's his fault for not getting here. But as the child, it's like, oh my God, like this is I'm so happy to see them. It's all this excitement, and it's to, so something that's not a big deal to the adult, from the child's perspective, it's a huge deal, so I always try to do that. Another thing you were saying that I think is so important. Now, it's funny because we're just talking about James Corbett's documentary on Bill Gates, which is a phenomenal documentary. But I remember one time he was on, and we were talking about our kids, because I think when you're dads, it's hard not to. You always say, like, like, oh, those parents who always talk about their kids, and then you have kids and you become the parent who always talks about your kids. But we were talking about how, like, the most important tool to give your child isn't teaching them or telling them how or what to think. It's teaching them how to think. And that's the most, like, that's exactly what you're talking about, critical thinking. Don't tell your kids what to think. Don't tell them, like, this is the opinion you should adopt, this is the opinion you should have on this issue, but teach them how to think. Do exactly what you do every day, and that's question all the narratives, look at things from all perspectives, and try to, and again, we are emotional creatures. It's hard for them not to come into play at some point, but also recognize that that's also a part of the process, is like recognizing, okay, maybe my emotions influence me to go in this direction or that direction, or react that way, and constantly self-analyzing. I mean, you're really good at that. Do you think maybe the exercise was your therapy, or what was it that you think led you to be so good at not picking a team and always questioning everything from all perspectives, and not being tribalistic?
I think my parents played a big role in that, in allowing us to be like autonomous and allowing us to have freedom towards doing things that were unconventional. And I never really needed a direction, from my parents. I never really needed, not that I didn't need direction from them. I didn't need to give them like my life's direction. I didn't need to say, hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to graduate from high school. I'm going to go to this college and I'm going to have this job. They never demanded that of me. And it was really an amazing experience to grow up and to, have the ability to pick and choose just about anything, which is actually pretty scary though, too. To not have any plans towards any one particular thing is kind of difficult. But my parents were always very like supportive, and that allowed for me to have a lot of freedom. I think in terms of being open-minded more nowadays, I think it's really important that you finish off a lot of things that you say with a question mark rather than just a period after it, because I think it's important. If I say I'm a sensitive person, uh, well, maybe it would be great to say, why am I a sensitive person? Why not explore that a little bit? And maybe I work on myself for a while. Maybe I examine that a little further. And maybe I say, does that serve me to have my feelings get hurt every other day in every direction? Does that feel good? Do I enjoy that? Is that a great path for me to stay on if I get my feelings hurt from social media? But sometimes when you start to examine some of these things, you don't even understand or even know the root cause of it. And so I think it's really helpful to examine these things and to, go down that rabbit hole and to start to understand more about yourself. And so as I started to explore a lot about myself, and as I started to unravel all this bullshit I was wrapped up in for so many years, with thinking I was dumb, thinking I wasn't capable of learning because I had struggled in school. I thought that that's what that equated to. Okay, I struggled in school. I wasn't good in math. I had a hard time learning. I wasn't allowed to play an instrument. I wasn't allowed to uh, even try, even to give a shot to a different language, because like this kid struggles with so many other things. Let's just have him not worry about that. And so I was exempt from a lot of those things. And so therefore, my interpretation of that, the story that I bought, was that I was dumb. And I put a period at the end of that. Okay, you're dumb, period. And you're an athlete, so you're good at some of this other stuff. This gym stuff you can be pretty good at because you're stronger than your friends and your buddies. And you're pretty good at like football and anything physical you're pretty good at. But let's wrap ourselves up. Let's mummify ourselves in this story that we're dumb, and let's insulate that, and let's have this live onward. This is referred to as it's called an anti-rational meme. I don't know if anybody's ever read the book from Richard Dawkins, where he talks about, he's the one who coined the term meme. And a meme is something that will, just like a gene, it needs to figure out a way to propagate itself. It needs to figure out a way to live onward. The only way it can live onward is if you continue to feed it. It needs to eat, just like anything else. It needs to eat to survive. And if you feed an anti-rational meme, like I did for many years, you insulate everything from criticism. Criticism is the one thing that would be the most valuable to pull yourself out of that. Hey, Mark, are you actually really dumb? Or even thinking like, just because you are put in some special classes, you think that you're dumb? Like that would be kind of it's a criticism, but it's a constructive criticism. You know, you think about that term, constructive, like you're trying to build something. I'm going to build something off the backbone of this criticism. This is foolish that I think I'm dumb. And then later, you know, many years later, I find out that, and this is probably something that no one's ever heard before, but I'll say it right now, is that any human being with a healthy brain has the capacity to know and understand anything that's ever been understood or known by any other human being that's ever walked the face of the earth. That is fucking crazy. So you or I could understand Sir Isaac Newton's theories of gravity, or Elon. We can understand different things that Elon Musk explores, or we can understand literally anything. When it comes to physical stuff, that's where shit gets weird, because then you just have genetics in there, and there's a whole slew of things that you can't quite follow or you can't quite do, right? But when it comes to mental capacity, anyone that has a healthy brain has the ability to understand physics, quantum physics, equations, math, science, history, all of it. And you might be predisposed to like maybe a little bit better understanding or grasp of something. But like if I said, hey, do you think you can learn Chinese? You might say, no, man, I don't think I can, because you're kind of thinking, I have kids, I'm on a podcast, A, B, C, D, right? But if I said, do you think it's possible, or do you think it's impossible for you to learn Chinese? You'd be like, fuck no, I could learn some Chinese. Like, how hard could it, like, I just got to spend time doing it. I never realized until now, pretty much, that everything revolved around your interest levels. That's the single greatest determinant of your success, is how interested you are in something. And it sounds so dumb to say that. It sounds so foolish. Like it sounds like, oh, okay. Well, of course, you know, it's going to be something that you're interested in. But I think what happens is a lot of times we're doing stuff that we're not that interested in. Back to what I said earlier about the nutrition. If you cheat on your diet, you know, every 2 or 3 days, you're just not that interested in the moment of getting to the goal that you want to get to in the fashion that you're trying to get there in. And so maybe you have to reconsider and recalibrate some of your ways to kind of match up with your new goals. But I think, you know, I wish I would have known this a lot earlier, that, you know, we're capable of understanding just about anything. That would have been really, really helpful when I was younger. But now I try to have this kind of white belt mentality where someone comes on the podcast. The podcast has been massively helpful to open up my mind. And podcasts in general, the work of Joe Rogan and stuff like that, has been huge. But having a white belt mentality and just recognizing like, hey man, like you know a lot about a bunch of different things, but you're not really a specialist in this particular area. What if somebody knows nutrition the way that you cared, what if somebody's interested in nutrition to the point that you were interested in squatting 1,080 and bench pressing 854 pounds? That's the person I want to listen to. What if somebody does any job in that fashion? I want to communicate with that person, because I think that's fascinating, that somebody found something that they love so much, they poured their heart and soul into it, And to me, like, those are some really cool measures of success, is the fact that somebody found something, they came to the conclusion of, like, they just really fucking love this thing. I mean, think about, like, when a good friend tells you they're getting married or something. I mean, of course, we're going to give them shit for it too, right? But or they have a baby or something like that. You're just thinking, man, like, that is so, like, that is so cool that you found somebody that you love that much, that you care about that much. That must be really important to you, and that you are getting that love back. And now you have a child together. Like, it's fucking awesome. Like, it's something really, really cool to celebrate. So when I find somebody that has found a job or a hobby, or they've gone back to do something that they used to love, that they've been missing for a long time, I'm always so pumped for them, because I'm like, man, that is a huge component of life, just to find the shit that you're interested in and do it a lot. And then once you do those things a lot, you'll get good at those things, you'll get better at those things, and those things will help fulfill your life. They'll help make you happy and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I tell people all the time on this show, I'm like, if you have a hobby that you enjoy, that you love, that maybe you got out of, pick it up, start doing it again, find the time. You're going to be happier. You're going to feel more fulfilling. I mean, unfortunately, we've kind of built a society, and I have the exact same childhood story. I'm a Portuguese immigrant, came here when I was 4, kind of learned English. It was like my second language, and was a little behind and never really caught up, and it was in special ed. And basically the teachers were telling me that, like, hey, you don't like learning, so let's throw you to a vocational school. You're not book smart. And then once I got into, like, I barely graduated high school, once I got into like everyday life, and I was doing a lot of commuting work and full time, and I got obsessed with just different research and documentaries, and then eventually, of course, podcasts. And Joe Rogan's was one of the ones that really inspired me when I started in 2013, because he had so many different interesting people and different perspectives. And I'm like, wait, how am I into all this? I thought I didn't like learning. And it's like, oh, it wasn't that I didn't like learning. I just didn't, I either didn't like what you were teaching me, or the method that you were teaching me. And so it wasn't a me thing. And this reminds me of I'm sure you're familiar with Brian Callen. Brian Callen used to have a show called Mixed Mental Arts with this co-host Hunter Motz. Well, Hunter Motz has been on my show a bunch, and he wrote a book called The Straight A Conspiracy. And The Straight A Conspiracy is exactly what you're talking about. The conspiracy is that any of us can get straight A's. It's just that we're all capable of doing anything. That the only difference between why I suck at math, I'm like you, I suck at math. The only reason why I suck at math, and I have a buddy who got his CPA license in his early 20s, and he can do that, was because for some reason he became interested in math and I didn't. So he was pushed in that direction. He either had and I guess the why is always interesting to me. Like, well, what led him there, and what, maybe it was a teacher that like found a really fascinating way to connect with him, a good math teacher. Maybe it was math. He found some benefit in math and some other things he was doing, some other hobbies he liked. But whatever reason it is, we're all capable of it. The conspiracy is that somebody is really good at that, and like, he's a math person, I'm just not a math person. It's just that's just not me. It's like, no, that's bullshit. We're all capable. But I think a problem with our society is, and we both have daughters, mine's much younger than yours, but if our daughters had 2 boys who like them, and one was a passionate musician who's kind of like making ends meet, kind of playing at bars on weekends or whatever, the struggling musician artist, and the other boy who likes her is a investment banker, or is in the stock market in some sense, and makes a lot of money and comes from a wealthy family, we would tell them, like, hey, that dude's a loser, go date that guy. And it's like, but what are we doing? We're almost feeding into this idea that you should do not things you're interested in, not things you enjoy and you're passionate about, but do the thing that makes you money. Even though that dude who makes a lot of money might be an asshole, might work incredible hours where he's never even going to be home to take care of your daughter or to give her the love that she wants or needs. And the struggling musician, maybe he's not financially in a great spot or as good of a spot, but has a great heart, is doing stuff that he loves, which makes him a happier, more fulfilling person. So like, it's almost like deep rooted in our society, where so there was a study where they had kids at a really young age, and I can't remember what grade they were in, maybe kindergarten, preschool. And they asked them, like, how many of you guys find yourselves creative or have a good, or, just use your imagination well? And like every kid raised their hand. And like as you get older, less and less kids would raise their hand. And so is that so when somebody like yourself or somebody like me who does stuff that I would consider creative or in content creators, um, the difference between I think us and them is that we didn't listen to the teachers and we're like, fuck this system. I don't like just regurgitating information. I like being creative. And everybody had those capabilities, but as they got older, the world has told them like, hey, that's a waste of time. Like, don't stop like doing that creative thing. Like, how is that going to get you six figures? How is that going to get you? And in your case, it probably, they were obviously wrong, because obviously you have many successful businesses or whatnot. But I probably should have ended that rant with a question. But hopefully you have something something to say.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there. I think that we maybe make the mistake of thinking that knowledge comes from authority. Knowledge comes from somebody that we view as smart. And we don't really ever understand the epistemology of it. Knowledge is created. Knowledge is created through criticism, and so who can add criticism to a conversation? Anybody. What about when you mention something about your podcast and you start talking to your wife about it? Let's just hypothetically say that your wife doesn't listen to any podcasts. A lot of females don't really listen to many podcasts. And you mention something to her and she just has an idea out of nowhere, and you're like, oh fuck, that's a great idea. Meanwhile, she has never even really heard or seen a podcast, or doesn't really even give a shit about it or whatever. It doesn't matter the level of where we think somebody is, because I think a lot of times we just associate experience with being something that makes you knowledgeable. But we don't have to experience things to have good understandings of them. The stars is a great example. The stars in the sky at night, like there's never been anybody that has gone up and physically like touched a star or been inside a star or grabbed a bunch of samples of, maybe we have at this point, I don't know. But it would probably be impossible because it's probably too hot or what, like I don't even know. But we don't need to have like physical experiences with the star to have as much knowledge as we can possibly gather about the star being there. And we're able to even give these things different names, and like there's different planets and stuff like that we've never been to, that we have some experiences with through some of the technology that we can see some of these things. Now there's also like somebody will start to add criticism to that, and it doesn't have to necessarily be someone that studies the stars all the time. They might just happen to have just a brain that maybe is working a little differently and thinks of something that can add value to it. So I think a lot of times, when it comes to school, I think that we just think this professor is going to know best. When it comes to our society, this doctor is going to know best. When we saw what Dr. Fauci was doing throughout the pandemic, it was pretty obvious that he was guessing, right? But that's all we have. That's all any of us have. This is your best guess at a podcast. My podcast is the same thing. It's my best observation or guess towards having a podcast. No one's necessarily really right or wrong. Some of us are able to gather more attention than others, but it doesn't make any one particular one necessarily contain a better understanding or knowledge of anything, really. So I think that where knowledge comes from is something that gets to be really screwed up in our society, and it ends up being people can say facts. Facts are one thing. Facts are things that we think we know fairly well. But then there's also like having an understanding is different. You knowing that that Biden is now our president That's a fact. That's something that you have gained knowledge of. But then how much of an understanding would someone have of that? That's different. Okay, well, here's going to be some of the changes that are going to come with that, and here's the things I researched, and here's what I believe, this will lead to, type of thing. So there's facts, and then there's understandings, and I think we get kind of confused on where knowledge creation like comes from in the midst of all this. And knowledge creation, again, it comes from criticism, conjecture, it comes from error correction, it comes from messing up a lot. And because human beings possess the ability to fuck up a lot, we have an infinite ability to mess up. We have an infinite ability to kind of make guesstimates, I guess. And because of that, that's what makes us quote unquote superior to all the other beings that are on this earth, or at least that's what we believe at the moment.
Well, yeah, that reminds me of that quote, like a smart person learns from their mistakes, a smarter person learns from other people's mistakes. And it's absolutely true. Like, you don't have to actually go through the experience yourself to learn from it. You can learn from somebody else explaining it to you, or from witnessing it yourself. Another thing you were saying about experts, or about how like your wife could give you I mean, my wife's the same way. She never listens to my podcast, could care less about what I'm doing, which can be frustrating, but sometimes it's good to kind of, I guess, detach from it. But uh she could give me a like you said, a great suggestion, because she's seeing things from a different perspective. She's seeing, like, and you see it a lot with like scientific breakthroughs, where somebody who has the breakthrough isn't necessarily an expert in that field. It's somebody who's looking at things from maybe a different perspective. I think some of the most interesting people are people who aren't necessarily experts on one specific thing, because they can have limits to their perspective, because they only, they spend all their time only studying this way of thinking, this method of thinking. So I think, I've talked about this a lot on the show recently, about like because what you're saying, like, and everything with a question mark, I love that, because philosophy to me is like one of the most underrated, underappreciated things, because it does question, what is a fact, what is this, what is that, what is it, like, question everything. And the beautiful thing about philosophy is that the same questions have been asked for thousands of years. None of them have answers, and it's just philosophers debating the same things over and over and over again. And to me, that's really important, because the second you kind of adopt a ideology, your thinking stops, right? So ideology, and Danielle Bignelli said this on my show not too long ago, how like you know it can inherently a bad thing, ideologies. We look at it as like, oh, it's, it could be a good thing, but it kind of isn't, because the second you decide that this is my ideology, your thinking stops. So it's like we question things, we explore ideas, we explore questions, and then we decide like, okay, this is where I plant my flag. I'm, this is where I stop. This makes the most sense to me. But what we really should be saying, like you said, end it with a question mark. This is what makes the most sense now. But let me still continue to question it. Let me, So that's why, even though like libertarians, I have a lot of libertarian friends. I'm a fan of people who would consider themselves left leaning, right leaning, whatever it may be. Like, I don't like to put a label on who, on my thinking, because the fear is, I'm going to stop questioning those ideas, and those ideas could be wrong, and I could be defending ideas that are wrong, or it could be debunked, or whatnot. So yeah, all that is so important to usually it takes a lot of psychedelics to get to where you are, to be able to like self-reflect and self-analyze. But I know you're a very busy guy, and I've probably taken a bunch of your time, but any last thoughts, anything else, any advice you want to give to the listeners, and then maybe any upcoming projects? Or I know you just celebrated your 500th episode, which was pretty crazy too. That was wild. Anything you want to promote, or tell people where they can connect with you?
I'm just going to share this. Like I research stuff a lot, and I come across some great stuff. And this is by a buddy of mine. He used to be the thinker on EliteFTS.com. He used to be a strength coach, and then he moved on to something that I would consider maybe some of the greatest work of our time in terms of psychology, I guess you'd say. I don't even know what category to put some of this stuff in, but his name is James Smith, and he made an app, It's called Epic Consulting. The app is not available yet, but he's done a great job with it. And in reviewing some of this stuff and listening to some of this stuff, he gave me like a preliminary look at some of the things. But some of the things he shared in there, I'm just going to share this kind of one quote with you guys because I think it's really beneficial. You know, we have a ability to like interpret stuff whatever way we want to choose. You know, and one of the things he usually says, which is like when he says these things to you, they're very frank and they make you pause and you're like, fuck, he's right. Like, you know, why do I choose that? Or why did I do that way? And one of the things he says is, have a more helpful choice than stress, you know? So like when you say, oh man, that's really making me stressed out. And the first thing to recognize about it is that nothing can make you do anything. Unless it's sometimes physical. If someone's got physical harm to you, then it's a different circumstance. But for the most part, you know, a post from somebody else can't make you outraged. It can't make you mad. You're making yourself mad. It's your interpretation of that. And I know that a lot of people probably have already come to some of these conclusions through some stoicism and through some things like that. But I find this to be amazing right here is where he says, stress can only result if facts are negatively interpreted. Stress can only result if facts are negatively interpreted. That's what's like, that to me is really wild because you're like, why am I choosing to interpret them negatively? I mean, you ever go on someone's social media that you don't really even like? You ever do that before? Like I'm fucking guilty. You know, I've deleted social media for a number of reasons. Even with all the stuff that I have learned, I just don't deal with it well. So I've dumped it. The only thing I have, I guess, is like YouTube, and I look at some of that stuff. But I just find that to be really interesting because when we're in the moment, when we're in the experience, it doesn't feel like we have a choice. You know, the wife says something, harsh to you that you kind of interpret it negatively, and now you're upset, or you say something back that now hurts her, and now you're just in this like whole mess. And it's like, well, I could have probably gave pause to that for a minute. I could have probably thought about it a little bit more. And I could have also looked at things from her perspective. Maybe her day was fucked up and I didn't even consider that. Like maybe I should just sit down for a minute and just like, we don't have to respond to stuff so quick. A little chunk of advice for people is just in general, if kidding around aside, because you need to be able to fuck around with people. You need to be able to mess around with people. Kidding around aside, if you have anything that you're going to text somebody that you feel has any sort of negative vibe to it at all, just don't fucking send it. Just don't send it. It's not going to be productive. Even if you have it like written on somebody's post or something like that, you know, just give it a pause for a minute and think about, am I going to be pleased with myself for sending this, you know, tomorrow or down the road? And if this actually does hurt this person, I mean, sometimes I guess that's your intent, right? But like most of us, like we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to, you know, so you're releasing it because you think it makes you feel better because you're frustrated about a certain thing. But just understand, like, that's not going to land on somebody else so well. And maybe they don't know some of these things. Maybe they don't know that we're allowed to choose whether we are going to respond with stress or not. So these are just some things I found really helpful over the years. And I think you had something to comment about.
No, I was just gonna just add, if you write things, there's a method that of like, I don't know what to call it, therapy or whatnot. If you write it, just write it all out the way you would want it to write it, and then delete it, and it still makes you feel better because you feel like you got it off your chest, even though you didn't send it. But you're absolutely right in regards to, just also the fact that, like, pump the brakes, don't send it, maybe write it out, maybe that'll make you feel better, and delete it. But if you don't send it, wait and see if you're still that upset, a couple hours later or the next day. And in most cases, you'll be like, I can't even put myself now in the same mental spot I was in when I wanted to write that angry text message or email or whatever. Like, I can't even understand that person because I'm not that mad anymore. And that's where, like, working out is so beneficial, because when you work out to the point where you're exhausted, I mean, and also I that's one thing I love about sports. You know, I play basketball and I play a little bit of soccer, and it's like, you know, when you push yourself to those limits, there's very few things that can get me mad because I'm just too like being angry. When people say like, oh, you know, don't hold grudges because it takes up too much energy. Like you notice that when you have a really tough workout because you're like, I can't be mad. Like that takes up energy, which I don't have right now. But when you have the energy, being mad's not a big deal. But when you're actually like limited with energy, you realize like, okay, yeah, being mad's like takes up too much energy, so I'm not going to stress about this, or I'm not going to. But even stress, like you said, how do you look at it? Why are you stressing? My wife gets so mad at me when she says when I say things to her. I'm like, I didn't make you mad. You decided to be mad because of what I said, and then you know, I'm like, it's the way you're interpreting it. And you know, it's so true. Like it's all like it's internal. Like nobody can force you uh to be mad or sad or stressed. Like you have control over that. And knowing you have control over that is the first step in controlling it. And we are emotional creatures, so we there's limits, right? Like you said, there's gonna be moments where you're gonna get upset. But you know, in many cases, I'm sure if we do like you said, just like don't send the text message, don't send the email, and you wait, your interpretation of how necessary sending that is going to change.
Absolutely. If people want to find out more stuff about me, you can just check out some of the social media platforms that I have other people run for me, which is at Mark Smelly Bell. I have a YouTube channel, which is Mark Smelly Bell, where I actually talk quite a bit about philosophy and some different things like that. And then I have kind of an old school YouTube channel that still has a lot of great content as far as lifting goes, and that's Super Training '06. I think that one is. So check some of that stuff out. And thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate your time. It was a really fun and interesting conversation. Keep up the great work too, man. Your podcast, I mean, is inspiring. To have somebody who didn't do good in school, who some people would call a meathead, talk about philosophy and these I mean, it really just everybody from the outside looking in who wouldn't, you know, who has these stereotypical ideas of what, you know, somebody who exercises or a gym rat might be. It's like you just
Right.
throw all that shit out the window.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Mark. Take care.
Take care.